The bullet that hit me didn't come from the enemy in front of me, but from the rifle of the brother standing right beside me. He shot me, left me for dead in the freezing Afghan desert, and spun a perfect story about my heroic sacrifice. He had calculated everything, except for one thing. I didn't die. Now, while he's being hailed as a hero, and I'm being treated like a suspicious deserter, I have only one mission left: to tear down his empire of lies. But how do you expose a devil when the whole world believes he's a saint? My name is Captain Leo Martinez. In the Rangers, they call me Ghost. Not because I'm invisible, but because I always get the job done quietly and come home. My principle is simple: bring my men back safe and sound. A commendation is never worth more than their lives. I learned that from my mother, a doctor. She always reminded me that life is irreplaceable. The medical knowledge she passed down wasn't so I could be reckless, but so I would know how to protect myself, protect my team, and keep them alive. But not everyone saw it that way. On my team was Sergeant Marcus Thorne, Apex, a skilled soldier, a born predator. The problem with Marcus was that he always needed to be at the top, probably because of the massive shadow cast by his colonel father. To Marcus, a battle was only worth fighting if it ended in a blaze of glory. He saw my caution as cowardice. The crack between us started to show after an ambush in Helmand Province. Dust and grit stung my face. The crackle of AK-47 seconds echoed off the mud brick rooftops, rounds slamming into the wall right next to my ear. "Rook, 3 o'clock. Keep their heads down," I yelled into the comms, my voice steady, without a trace of panic. It was the only way to keep things from falling apart. Dave responded immediately with a short, precise burst of fire. Across the alley, Marcus moved like a panther, hugging a corner, his M4 ready to spit fire. We were still a machine, but the gears were starting to grind. Ghost on point, Apex on right flank, Rook covering our 6. Diamond formation. Move to rally point Bravo. You copy? Solid copy. The response came in unison. We moved. Fast. Clean. 30 minutes later, we were in the Humvee, leaving that godforsaken village without a scratch. Mission success. No casualties. To me, that's all that mattered, but not to Marcus. At the debrief in the command tent, thick with the smell of burnt coffee, he cut me off while I was analyzing the mission. "We could have had them, Captain," he said, his voice dripping with confidence, not looking at me but at the rest of the team. "If we'd pushed forward instead of pulling back, we could have wiped out the whole nest." I put my pen down and looked him straight in the eye. "And we might have had 2 body bags on the way home." "The mission was recon, Marcus, not a glory run." Marcus smirked. "We're hunters, not babysitters." The air in the tent grew thick. I saw Dave Jensen nod in agreement with Marcus. The kid had chosen a side. I ended the meeting. "Stick to the protocol, Thorne." "That's an order." He shrugged. "Roger that, Captain." But the way he said Captain sounded like an insult. I couldn't sleep that night. I wasn't worried about the enemy outside the wire. I was worried about the fracture growing right inside my own house. I just didn't realize that fracture was about to swallow me whole. The crack didn't take long to spread. New orders came on a sweltering morning in Helmand. We were assigned a high-priority mission. The target was a notorious arms dealer, known as Kassab the Butcher. The man was a phantom, never seen, but his network had supplied weapons for half the attacks in the region. Our mission was simple on paper: identify Kassab's main depot and call in an airstrike. No engagement unless necessary. Intel suggests a major transaction is going down at an old tannery south of the valley, I said in the final briefing, pointing to a spot on the map. A shipment of shoulder-fired missiles, but there are rumors of a cash payment on site as well. The objective is to confirm, record, and mark. Do not engage unless forced. Marcus said nothing, just a slight curl of his lip. I saw a restlessness in his eyes. It wasn't fear, It was ambition. The night before we deployed, I happened to walk past the team's quarters and heard whispering. I stopped, hiding behind a supply crate. It was Marcus and Dave. "Think about it, Rook," Marcus said, his voice low and persuasive. "How many more years are you going to risk your life in this shithole? 5? 10? For what? A medal and a few scars?" There was a pause. I heard Dave sigh. "But it's the mission, Sergeant. To hell with the mission. Our mission is to survive. Intel says there's a big cash payment. Dirty money. If we take it, nobody knows. Nobody cares. You could take care of your mom, buy a house, live a real life, instead of being cannon fodder. But what about the captain?" Dave's voice was hesitant. "He'd never go for it." Marcus's voice turned cold as ice. "That's the point. Leo's righteousness will get us both buried out here. Sometimes, for the team to survive, one man has to be left behind. You get what I'm saying? In the heat of battle, things happen. A stray round, a tragic accident, and we come home heroes, with our futures secured." I stood there, frozen, the blood turning to ice in my veins. This wasn't just a disagreement. It was a conspiracy. But I had no proof. Just whispers in the night. Reporting it would just launch an internal investigation, splitting the team right before a critical mission. I decided I would watch Marcus myself, convinced I could control the situation. That was my first mistake. The next night, we moved under a sliver of moon. The air was cold. Everything went perfectly. We approached the tannery undetected, taking up positions on a ridge overlooking the compound. Through my binoculars, I could see dusty trucks and armed figures moving in the shadows. And then I saw it. 2 large metal cases being carried out of an armored vehicle. That wasn't weapons. Marcus, lying next to me, whistled softly over a private comm channel. "Captain, is that what I think it is?" "Stay quiet, Apex," I hissed. "Focus on the mission." But I knew what he was thinking. So was I. A few $1,000,000 probably, sitting in those 2 boxes, untraceable cash. And that's when all hell broke loose. An explosion tore through the night from behind us. An RPG. They knew we were here. It was a trap. Bullets erupted from all directions. Chaos exploded. "We're compromised. Fall back to the west," I yelled, laying down suppressive fire while trying to pull a stunned Dave back. In that moment, through the smoke and roaring gunfire, I saw Marcus wasn't falling back. He was moving sideways, toward the tannery, toward the money. "Marcus, the order is to withdraw." He turned to look at me, and in the muzzle flash of his rifle, I saw a smile on his face. He raised his M4. I thought he was aiming at an enemy tango behind me. That was my second, and final, mistake. A sharp, searing pain tore through my lower abdomen. The impact was so powerful it knocked me backward, forcing all the air from my lungs. I lay there, stunned, staring up at the starry sky through the smoke. I heard Dave scream, "Captain's hit!" And then I heard Marcus's voice, cold and decisive. "Hostiles everywhere. Cover me while I grab the intel." "Leave him." I tried to speak, to give an order, but only a wet gurgle came out. Blood was pooling beneath me, soaking my uniform. Through my blurring vision, I saw the silhouettes of Marcus and Dave disappear into the darkness, carrying the metal cases. They left me. The brother I trusted had shot me and left me for the vultures. As my consciousness faded into black, my last thought wasn't of death. It was of betrayal, and of the silent promise that if I survived, I wouldn't let them get away with it. The darkness should have been the end. It wasn't. I woke to a throbbing pain. The cold night air of the desert seeped into my bones. The wound in my lower gut was a hot, wet mess. Blood. Too much blood. I knew I didn't have much time. My battlefield first aid training kicked in automatically. Airway, breathing, circulation. Circulation. Damn it. With what little strength I had left, I tore a strip of fabric from my pant leg. My mother's voice echoed in my head, as clear as if she were standing next to me. Leo, direct pressure is everything. Find the source of the bleed and hold it tight. I balled up the fabric, pressed it hard against the wound, and clenched my teeth to keep from screaming. The pain was a white-hot knife twisting in my gut. How long I lay there, I don't know. Time became meaningless, reduced to the faint beat of my heart and the constant throb of pain. I knew infection would finish me, if blood loss didn't do it first. I needed to clean the wound. Many desert plants have antiseptic sap, son. Observe. Nature has its own way. I crawled, dragging my body across the cold ground. Every inch was torture. I found a low, thick-leafed shrub I recognized from survival training. Using my combat knife, I cut off a few leaves, chewed them into a pulp in my mouth despite the bitter taste, and spit the paste directly onto the wound. It burned like acid, but it was a good pain, a purposeful pain. I hid in a crevice between some rocks, shivering against the cold. I thought about Marcus, about his smile. Anger flared, a cold fire that kept me conscious. He had planned it all. He knew I wouldn't die instantly. He wanted the desert, or infection, or an enemy patrol to finish the job for him. Clean. No witnesses, but he made one mistake. He thought he left a soldier behind. He was wrong. He left a doctor's son. Dawn arrived, bringing the scorching heat. I had almost given up when I heard a noise. Footsteps. I gripped my knife, ready for one last fight. An old Afghan man with a silver beard and eyes etched with the deep lines of time appeared at the mouth of the crevice. A young boy followed him. They looked at me, then at my wound. There was no hostility in their eyes, only pity. The old man said something in Pashto that I didn't understand, but I understood his actions. He motioned to the boy, and together, they helped me to my feet. I was too weak to resist, too exhausted to care. They led me to a small mud hut, hidden behind a cluster of large rocks. They saved me. They gave me water, a piece of dry flatbread, and the woman of the house replaced my leaf poultice with a green herbal salve. They didn't ask who I was. They just saw a dying man, and they acted. I stayed there, in that small hut, battling fevers and nightmares. I learned a few words of Pashto, Nun for bread, Oba for water, and Dushman enemy. Kassab was their enemy. He had taken their land, their sons. When I pointed to my uniform and said, Kassab, Dushman, the old man nodded. We had a common enemy. After nearly 3 weeks, when I could walk on my own, though with a heavy limp, the old man showed me a path that led toward a valley where he knew American forces often patrolled. Before I left, he handed me an old cloak and a walking stick. We said nothing, just looked into each other's eyes. Some gratitude needs no words. When I saw the silhouette of an American Humvee in the distance, I felt no joy. I only felt a strange coldness. I had survived. But my real war was just beginning, and this time, the enemy wasn't some nameless gunman. It was the men who wore the same flag on their sleeves as I did. The Humvee screeched to a halt, kicking up a cloud of dust. The barrel of the M2 Browning on its roof was pointed straight at me. A young soldier, his eyes narrowed with suspicion, yelled over the rumbling engine, "Stay where you are. Hands on your head." I slowly complied. The old cloak fell to the ground, revealing my tattered uniform and emaciated frame. Surprise registered on their faces. They didn't see an enemy, but one of their own. However pathetic he looked, the patrol leader, a young lieutenant, stepped out of the vehicle, his rifle still raised. "Who are you?" "Captain Leo Martinez." "Ranger. Reporting for duty," I said, my voice raspy from disuse. The lieutenant blinked, disbelief overriding his surprise. He spoke into his radio. and I could hear the confusion in the voice that answered. A silence. A silence that stretched on for far too long. When I got back to base, I wasn't welcomed as a hero who had returned from the dead. I was taken directly to the military hospital, but not to a normal recovery ward. My room had a guard posted outside 24/7. They took my statement, but the way they wrote, the way they looked at me, was more like they were interrogating a deserter than an officer. The truth was revealed to me cruelly, not through a direct confrontation, but in bits and pieces I overheard from nurses and officers who came to visit. Captain Leo Martinez, according to the official report, had been killed in action during an ambush. Sergeant Marcus Thorne and Private First Class Dave Jensen had risked their lives to retrieve critical intelligence and had desperately tried to save their commander. I knew that was a lie to justify them going back for the money. Their story was an epic. And my story? A soldier who suddenly reappears after 3 weeks, gaunt and ragged, with a wild tale of being shot and left for dead by his own men. A story with no proof, no witnesses, just the word of a man who was supposed to be dead. Marcus had been recommended for the Silver Star. Dave was praised for his loyalty. They were heroes. I was a problem. A ghost who had returned to disrupt. A perfectly packaged story. The biggest blow came when I was allowed to see my battalion commander. He was a good man, a seasoned soldier. But when I told him the truth, I saw not belief in his eyes, but weariness. "Captain," he said, his voice low, "Sergeant Thorne's report is airtight. Private Jensen's statement corroborates it completely. They both passed polygraphs. And you were out there for 3 weeks. You know, trauma can make a man confused. He was calling this cold-blooded betrayal confusion. I realized my problem. Marcus's lie wasn't just a lie. It had become the official truth. It was in the records, reported up the chain of command, and reinforced by 2 living witnesses. To prove my innocence, I didn't just have to expose his lie. I had to fight the entire system that had already accepted it. I lay in my hospital bed, staring at the white ceiling. The anger was no longer boiling. Instead, it settled, becoming something colder, sharper. Marcus had taken everything from me. My team, my honor, and almost my life. They couldn't hold me forever without official charges. After a week of close observation in the hospital, I was moved to a private room in the officers' quarters with a clear order. Do not leave the base, and report my schedule at all times. I was essentially a prisoner with the freedom to walk around a very large cage. They thought that would neutralize me. But a cage is also a fantastic observation post. If you know what to look for. An internal inquiry was launched, but it felt more like a formality. The person assigned to finalize my file was a major from JAG, named Isabella Rossi. I'd heard of her. Smart, tough, and by the book to a fault. She wasn't the type to be swayed by emotional stories. Our first interview was in a small, sterile office. Rossi sat across from me, a thick file placed neatly in front of her. She didn't beat around the bush. "Captain Martinez, the official report says you were killed in action. Yet here you are. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Her voice was flat, emotionless. I didn't tell her a hero story. I told her the truth, raw and unvarnished. I told her about the bullet, the pain, being left behind. I told her about the antiseptic sap, the Afghan family who saved me, the dry flatbread, and the bitter taste of the herbal ointment. I didn't ask her to believe me. I just presented the facts. Throughout the session, Rossi just took notes, her sharp eyes never leaving me for a second. I thought I had failed, but 2 days later, she found me in the mess hall. This time, no file, no interrogator's demeanor. She placed a cup of coffee in front of me. I reviewed the satellite surveillance reports and the ballistics analysis from the scene, she said quietly. Just loud enough for me to hear. Thorne's report has problems. The trajectory of the bullet that hit you couldn't have come from the enemy positions, he reported. It came from the flank. Exactly from his position. I looked at her, saying nothing. And their extraction timeline, she continued. It's too fast. There's no way they could have engaged in a heavy firefight, attempted to rescue you, and exfilled safely in that amount of time. Unless they never attempted to rescue you at all. Finally, someone saw what I saw. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice still wary. Because I hate sloppy reports, and I hate men who turn war into a stage for their own greed even more, she replied, a spark of fire in her eyes. But a gut feeling and a few discrepancies aren't enough. I need irrefutable proof. You know them better than anyone. Tell me their weak points. An alliance was formed, not with a handshake, but with a silent understanding. Izzy, she told me to call her, that was my arm on the outside. The one who could access information I couldn't. I was the brain. I knew the psychology of the men who had tried to kill me. Don't go after Marcus, I said, taking a sip of coffee. He's too smart. Too careful. He won't make a mistake. Go after Dave Jensen. That kid is living with guilt and fear. Push him. Not hard, just a little. He'll crack. Izzy nodded. I'll arrange a post-mission psychological evaluation with Private Jensen. Good, I said. And while you're at it, check his family's financials. A kid like Dave doesn't know how to hide money. He'll find a way to give it to his mom. A clumsy way. Izzy looked at me, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. You've been planning this, haven't you, Captain? I looked out the window, toward the Special Forces barracks where Marcus and Dave were living as heroes. I've had a lot of time to think, Major. The hunt had begun. This time, I was the hunter. And my prey didn't even know they were being watched. He thought I was a ghost. Fine, I would be the ghost he wanted, a ghost that would haunt him, pulling apart the empire of lies he had built, one brick at a time, until it all came crashing down. The war was no longer in the desert. It had moved into the shadows. And there, I was stronger. My cage at Fort Bragg gave me something the battlefield never could. Time. Time to watch. To analyze. To wait. I lived a life so boring, it was practically invisible. PT in the morning, library in the afternoon, my room at night. I followed every rule. I became a model soldier under restriction. My compliance made my handlers complacent. They didn't know that in the library, I wasn't reading novels. I was studying military case law, researching regulations, and planning my next move. Meanwhile, Izzy went to work. She summoned Dave Jensen to her office for a psych eval. Just as I predicted, the kid walked in with a hero's swagger. But his eyes darted around nervously. Izzy never even mentioned me. She just asked about the mission. But she asked detailed questions. Questions no one could prepare for. Private, in your report you stated the enemy attacked from the northeast. But it was dawn. The sun would have been rising in that direction. Did the glare affect your ability to identify their positions? Dave blinked, clearly flustered. Yes, Major. A little bit. Is that so? That's odd, Izzy said, turning a page. Because the astronomical charts show the moon set in the west-northwest at 05:17 hours that day. The ambush happened at 04:30. It was still pitch black. No Sunday. Silence filled the room. Dave started to sweat. He stammered something about muzzle flashes. Izzy just nodded and made a note. She didn't accuse him. She just planted a seed of doubt. She showed him his story had holes. A week later, that seed started to sprout. Izzy sent me a file through a secure channel. Inside were the bank statements of Dave Jensen's mother. Just as I thought. 3 weeks ago, she had received a deposit of $250,000. The source: winnings from an overseas sports betting company. An explanation that was too perfect, too clean, clumsy. Time to apply more pressure. I told Izzy over an encrypted call. Let it accidentally leak that JAG is investigating illegal gambling rings in the military. No need to name anyone. Just let the rumor mill do its work. Izzy did just that. And the effect was almost immediate. From my window, I could see part of the common area. That evening, I saw Marcus and Dave talking near a truck. It wasn't the friendly chat of brothers in arms. Marcus was talking, and Dave was listening. Dave's posture was hunched, his hands clasped nervously. And Marcus, even from a distance, I could feel the anger and authority in his gestures. He was reassuring, or more likely, threatening his weakest link. They were starting to panic. My final move wasn't complex. It was brutally simple. I knew Marcus had a habit. He never threw away old electronics, just stored them in his personal locker. He believed destroying them himself was safer than letting someone else handle it. He was too arrogant to believe anyone would dare go through a hero's locker. I needed something from that locker, and I knew exactly how to get in there unnoticed. After all, they didn't call me Ghost just because I survived. They called me that because I knew how to disappear in plain sight. To get into the Special Forces barracks, I needed a legitimate reason. Izzy created one. She arranged for a surprise, base-wide security inspection, citing intel about a potential insider threat. The controlled chaos was the perfect cover, as the security teams went room by room, creating a necessary distraction. I slipped away. I didn't need a key for Marcus's locker. A few seconds with a small homemade toolkit, and the metal door swung open without a sound. Inside, amongst the perfectly folded uniforms, was an old digital voice recorder. That was it. Marcus always used it to record tactical briefings, a habit from his academy days. He called it archiving for analysis. I called it arrogance. I took the recorder, replaced it with an identical one Izzy had procured, and vanished. The entire process took less than 3 minutes. The next day, Izzy formally summoned Marcus and Dave to her office. The stated reason was to clarify some final details for Sergeant Thorne's Silver Star nomination file. I sat in an adjacent observation room, along with the battalion commander Izzy had convinced to be there. He was still skeptical, but he had agreed to give me this one last chance. Through the monitor, I saw Marcus walk in with the confidence of a rock star. Dave followed, looking like a lamb to the slaughter. Izzy began slowly, asking the same old questions about the mission. Marcus answered smoothly, his story polished to perfection. "Thank you, Sergeant," Izzy said evenly. "Your report is very consistent. However, we have a few audio recordings from the pre-mission briefing we need to verify." Just a formality. She pressed play on a device. My voice, analyzing the map, filled the room. Marcus nodded, looking relaxed. "And this is the recording you made during the debrief after the first ambush," Izzy continued. She pressed play again, but the voice that came out wasn't from a debrief. Think about it, Rook. Sometimes for the team to survive, one man has to be left behind. A stray round. A tragic accident. It was Marcus's voice, low and cold, coming from his own recorder. The sound of a conspiracy. The color drained from Marcus's face. His confidence shattered like glass. He turned to look at Dave, his eyes blazing. Dave Jensen couldn't take it anymore. The kid completely broke down. "It was him. He made me do it," he sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. "I told him we shouldn't. I told him." Marcus jumped to his feet, about to say something, but then he saw me and the battalion commander step out of the adjoining room. When his eyes met mine, I saw no anger, no fear. I just saw the hollow emptiness of a man who had lost. The game was over. There was no noisy trial. The military hates negative attention. Everything was handled quickly and quietly, with Dave's confession and the audio recording. Marcus had no defense. He got 20 years for attempted murder and treason. Dave, for his cooperation, got 7. Marcus's silver star was replaced with a pair of handcuffs. My honor was restored. My record was cleared. The battalion commander met with me privately, not to give an order, but to say a single sentence. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Captain. They offered me my team back. A new team, built from the ground up. But I refused. Something inside me had changed. The absolute faith in the brother in your foxhole had been shattered by Marcus's bullet. It would never heal the same way. A few months later, I left the Rangers. I didn't leave the army. I just changed the battlefield. Now, I stand in front of a group of young soldiers at West Point. They look at me with respect and a little curiosity. They've heard the story of Ghost, the living legend. But I'm not here to talk about glory. I pull a handful of leaves from my pocket. In the worst-case scenario, when there's no medic, no med kit, this can save your life. I begin my lecture. My mother taught me this. Now, I'm teaching you. I no longer hunt enemies in the darkness. I've found a new purpose. To light candles in it. To prepare young soldiers to face all kinds of enemies, both the ones outside the wire and the more dangerous ones, the ones who might be standing right beside them. I had lost my brotherhood, but I had found my peace. And sometimes, that's the only victory that matters.